The year is 1939, and the invasion of Poland has begun. For most, the war would be fought with tanks and planes, but for one man, it was about to become a silent battle for survival. His name was Slavomir Rawicz, and he was about to do the impossible. He was about to walk out of hell. It started in the basement of the Lubyanka, the heart of the Soviet secret police. For months, Rawicz was subjected to the conveyor. It was a psychological torture designed to break the mind without ever leaving a mark on the body. You sit on a high stool under a burning electric light for 18 hours a day. You aren't allowed to sleep. You aren't even allowed to move. Every time your eyes close, a guard screams. Every time you slump, you're beaten. The Soviet state didn't just want a prisoner, they wanted a confession. They needed him to admit he was a spy, a saboteur, a ghost in the machine. When he finally signed the papers, it wasn't because he was guilty. It was simply because the light and the noise had become his entire world. Signing that paper didn't bring freedom. It brought a sentence of 25 years in the most remote labor camps on the planet. When the prisoners arrived at Camp 303, they found nothing. There were no barracks. There were no beds. The first task for a new arrival was to build their own prison. They were given primitive tools and told to clear the taiga. This was the norma, the quota system. In the Gulag, your life was measured in cubic meters of wood. If you cut your quota, you received 800 grams of black bread. If you failed, you received 400. Rawicz describes the winter of 1940, where the temperature dropped so low that the birds froze in midair and fell like stones from the sky. An escape from Siberia is impossible without help, and help came from the most unlikely source. The wife of the camp commandant, a woman named Ushakova, began to notice Rawicz. Perhaps she saw her own son in him, or perhaps she had simply seen enough death. In secret, she began to leave gifts: a heavy skin coat, a hunting knife, a handmade compass hidden in a loaf of bread. She provided the one thing the Soviet Union tried to crush: mercy. With these supplies, the impossible escape became a plan. Rawicz chose his team not for their strength, but for their will. The trip into the deep interior was a trial in itself. Thousands of prisoners packed into unheated freight cars designed for cattle. They traveled for weeks deeper and deeper into the interior of the continent. The only food, a daily ration of salted bread. The only water, the ice they could scrape from the iron bolts of the train car. On the night of April 9th, a blizzard struck. The wind was so violent it drowned out the sound of the wire cutters. They slipped into the darkness, carrying only a bag of flour and a desperate hope that the snow would cover their tracks. Weeks into their trek, they encountered a girl, Christina. She was only 18, another fugitive, hiding in the woods after her parents were arrested. She joined the group, becoming a symbol of hope for the 7 men. When spirits were low, she sang. When the path was lost, she pushed forward. But the Gobi Desert has no room for hope. They survived the forest, but the desert was a different kind of hell. Here, the temperature reached 120 degrees. Their water ran out within 48 hours. Rawicz described how their tongues began to swell until they could no longer close their mouths. They resorted to sucking on pebbles to stimulate saliva. As they crossed the burning sands, Christina's strength gave out.
Her feet were nothing but raw meat. Her eyes were clouded with sun blindness. One morning, she simply couldn't get up. Rawicz and the others carried her for days, but in the desert, water is life, and they had none. She died in the middle of a wasteland, miles from any road or any memory. They buried her in a shallow grave and marked it with a pile of rocks that the wind likely blew away by morning. If the desert was the furnace, the Himalayas were the final test. By the time they reached the foothills, they were little more than walking skeletons. They had no climbing gear, no oxygen, and their shoes, they had long since rotted away. They climbed through passes that even the locals avoided. Of the 7 who left the wire, only 3 would walk into a British outpost in India on an afternoon in March 1942.